Hello and welcome to the show today, Sherine.
Thank you. Hello, hello, hello. Thank you for really inviting me. It's such a pleasure to get to know you, to meet you. Yes.
Yeah, I'm so excited to talk about pregnancy with you today, and knowing that you are a trained and experienced midwife
Mm.
brings a totally new level to this conversation today. I want to talk to you today, and I'm sure that so many listeners are interested in, your development. How did you get into midwifery, and are you
Mm.
still working as a midwife? And tell me a little bit about you.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Well, I trained a long time ago as a midwife. So in South Africa, where I did my official training, you had to be a nurse first, and then you go on to do the other trainings. So everybody kind of went from nursing to midwifery to whatever other speciality. So I went into midwifery. And so that was in the 1980s. And I really enjoyed my midwifery. I loved being there. We were able to go out into the rural communities and do work there. And there was I suppose one of the things that I really realized is we were very unique in the fact that we had a natural birth unit. In the 80s, we had a natural birth unit, and I was allocated to go and work in that natural birth unit. And it was really interesting to kind of notice this different way of looking at pregnancy, which, of course, the fact that most hospitals now, it's very medicalized unless they've actually specialized in making sure that there are people that do more natural kind of work or more midwife led. This was rare. This was very rare, and most of the doctors didn't really want to know about it. They kind of stayed out of this particular unit. But I loved it. I loved the fact that women were just able to be with their bodies, just able to kind of go in and just be in that space. And also, the room was nice. It was pleasant to be in. And I think that was one of my first openings into thinking about what was possible.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had a patient or a client at that time, and I was only about 22, 23 at this point, and she talked to me about an orgasmic pregnancy. And she was telling me that in her first pregnancy, she had had this massive orgasm. And this blew my mind. It really blew my mind that you could have something like this. And she kind of said, every woman should be able to have that potential to have an orgasmic pregnancy. And of course, it's not unusual because you're moving down those areas. And so that was always in the back of my mind. And so I moved on in the sense that because I was only there for a year and then I kind of went back to my medical work. I then, when I left left South Africa, I went to England, and I realized that there was this yearning to work with pregnant women. And I joined up with someone called Dr. Gary Mother, who started the water births here in the UK. And we started working for the next 20 years as the gentle birth method. So really doing things like hypnotherapy, reflexology, working with the mums to give them what would be classified as a good birth, so that they have this kind of controlled birth that allows them to be empowered, really, to be able to make those choices. So that's what I did for a very, very long time. And I still do the gentle birth method. But I'm also moving in the sense where I do a lot of work in mental fitness. So I do a lot of work working on the minds of pregnant women so that we can shift some of those dynamics, which having trained for yourself in RTT. So yeah, that mind part is so crucial in shifting and changing the beliefs that carry for pregnant women. Yeah.
Yeah, I find this so fascinating because a lot of the times, and still nowadays, especially where I'm coming from Austria, being pregnant means you are being monitored by a medical doctor every month. And at the end of pregnancy, even more often.
Yeah.
There is no conversation, and I would say there's no space to connect with your baby and to truly feel how you feel. You're running after one scan after the other, And then I gave birth here in Denmark, where I live, and everything is very midwifery led. There are two
Right.
scans, two standard scans during the 9 months. And when you come from a culture where pregnancy is very medicalized and birth is very medicalized, you kind of feel lost. You feel like, what's happening? I don't have control. Nobody's looking at my baby. Is my baby okay? I don't know if my baby is okay, because you are just trying to find that external validation without being able to feel and without being able to relax into this sacred time.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I really love the connection between the mind and the body to empower the woman in that time of their lives.
Yes, yes, absolutely, and it is such an important part of life, and I want to get into that neurological aspect a little bit later. But what the one of the things that you've mentioned there, which is so important, is the fact that I think that when it becomes medicalized, we forget how to listen. We forget how to trust our body. We forget to listen. We forget to hear those signals and know how to deal with them in a very specific way. And part of the conscious pregnancy system is about teaching women how to trust themselves, how to be aware of the kinds of signals they're getting and to stop and to listen to them, to kind of sort them out, to get rid of the wood from the trees and be able to see exactly, yeah, okay, I'm feeling a little bit anxious about this now, but what exactly am I anxious about here? Is this because I'm afraid that something's going to go bad? Is this just because I just don't know? These kinds of things. And then what do you do with that knowledge? And I think for me, to do the conscious pregnancy system is you've got to get this deep inner sense of belief that you are a conscious creator, right? You are creating your life, and you are also helping co-create with your baby new circumstances for which you're going to bring this child into the world. So it's really about you being a co-creator of all these circumstances. And that means that you have the ability to be able to make decisions from a much different place, almost like you're in the field, and you can get a sense that something is there. You're not quite sure what it is yet, but you know and trust that it will tell you. And you have these deep connections, which for me is really the key of being a conscious creator. Yes.
It sounds like there's so much more to it than just pregnancy and birth.
Yeah.
It's how you view your life, how you view and allow autonomy into your life by, yourself, and not depending only on others and telling them how things should be.
Yeah. And I think my train of thought just disappeared there for a second, but I think what is so important is that a lot of the time when we get pregnant, we think we're making a conscious choice, right? But actually a lot of our choices are made by our unconscious. So we might be driven by needs and desires to get pregnant, but that can also be misunderstood in a way that this is a need and a desire just to create, right? So there's something about when we choose to get pregnant, there's something about thinking more about what kind of mum do I need to be in order to get pregnant, in order to be a good mum, in order to do this. Many women don't think about those thoughts, right? Especially when you're younger, because actually there's no real reason. A lot of the time you get pregnant and the babies pop out and it's not such a big issue. But the thing is, if we were to think about being that person of how do we change in order to create this baby and have this baby in the way that we would like as a citizen of the world, we will look at things very, very differently. Yeah, we'll think about it differently. We'll think about our choices differently, and we'll also make much better decisions, even if we're scared or frightened.
Yeah, you mentioned the conscious pregnancy systems. Tell us more about that.
Right. So it works with using the program works on a 12-week program basically, mainly because most people will come in maybe about 6 months rather than at the 3 months, which I would love them to be coming in, or even prior. So it's really based on 12 weeks where we look at a couple of things. One is that your body is not solid, right? So we go into this quantum world of your body is not solid. And if your body is not solid, then it's very malleable, right? It has the potential. So when we think about relaxing, we can relax and think about our just molecules just moving and just opening up, right? Having that kind of belief gives us an ability to be able to truly have an intention that's very, very direct. And it allows us then to be able to shift that space where we become the vessel. We just become the vessel that lets the baby go through. And that then means that it makes birth a lot easier, a lot more simple. But a conscious pregnancy is also realizing that the period of pregnancy is the one time when you and your baby are one system, right? What you think affects your baby, no matter what, right? So the calmer and more relaxed that you are, in the sense of having a sense of control, and a sense of, maybe not so much control, but a sense of presence, yeah? A sense of knowing that you're okay, that everything's okay and everything's working for you. That's a very powerful place to work from. And I think that, and then so what we're really doing is looking at those beliefs that hold that, and recognizing that with a growing baby, right, you've got the best chance to lay the foundations, the neurological foundations that are going to support them later on. I have one client who came to me. She was incredibly anxious, and just a recent one, incredibly anxious at 34 weeks. And I just thought, oh God, she's going to go into labor. She was a second-time mom, basically had a cesarean section the first time, and it sounded like it was a horrific first birth. In one of the first sessions, I sort of said, there's no reason, it sounds to me there's no reason you can't have a natural birth. I can't see that not happening. Anyway, she was booked for the cesarean. She did go into spontaneous labor at 36 weeks. And I said, no, we're going to stop this. And we did some of the mental fitness exercises that she's been doing in a program. And we stopped it. We stopped the contractions, and she came out. And before she came out, she told the midwife she's cancel her cesarean date because she's going to go for a natural birth. I was a little bit shocked. But let me tell you, we kind of worked with it and saying, this is going to be a first-time pregnancy. So it's really about going to be a gentle opening up. And there'll be stages, and we'll talk through each of those. But she was really, through the whole of the day, she labored, and I kept checking in how much comfort did she have. And she said, well, I'm absolutely fine. I'm managing these contractions like a dream. And she was really happy. And then at 7 o'clock, she said, they're about 5 centimeters dilated, went into labor. I went into the hospital, and she was already ready to push. So for her, she had the most glorious birth, right? Not, she had a couple of nicks, but that was it. No stitching. But what's really interesting is that sort of like 4 months later, she's had a real stressful time with her mom dying and her brother dying and all sorts of things. And she said the one thing that has been a dream is her baby has been so calm, so relaxed, and so happy. And I thought, well, that's amazing. And then I was reading an article just recently. And one of the things that a lot of people think is that, I don't know whether this is a question to ask you, but if we look at you, other than our parents, our genetics, what we give to our child, what's the other biggest factor that affects children or the growth or success of kids in their life? It's actually their peers.
Yeah.
It's their peers. So after a certain age, after 3, actually, children are looking out and want to be like other children, right? So their influence, your influence is reducing dramatically, believe it or not. So their job is to kind of move and become citizens of the world, And I mean, most mothers might not want to think that. So therefore, we've only got a short period in time to make a massive effect.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we can really make a massive effect at this point in their life and lay those neurological foundations that really help them make good decisions, even when their peers are doing things that they don't want, that they can be resilient and anti-fragile.
Yeah.
Isn't that the gift we want to give them?
Yeah. And it's really starts with pregnancy, and even before, like you said, you would love for women to join your program even earlier than halfway through their pregnancy, because there's just so much impact. Every thought we have creates a physical response in our body, and if we are one with our child, they will feel it. They feel the anxious thoughts, they feel the worry, they feel the depression, they also feel the happiness, the calmness, the trust. They feel the positive outlook and the hope. So if a child can be born with this positive bank of emotions, why not give it to them?
Yeah, exactly. Why not give them the gift that they can have? Now, I mean, of course, we know that between 0 to 3, you do a massive amount of work, right? So there is so much, there's, of course, our environment is something that's really important. But this is one time when there's no interruption. There's no interruption from anybody else, no external source that a baby can be affected by except by the mother. Mm-hmm. And that's a really powerful place, because that's when we all know that when you've got kids, you know that when you're not feeling so good, kids play up, right? They're just responding to what's going on in the field. And if you are in that space of being able to make those decisions and basically down regulate quickly, you're still going to experience anxiety. You're still going to experience odd things happening. But the quicker you bring your body back into that state of alignment, the quicker the baby learns how to do that. Yeah. Because it's a trigger response, isn't it? Someone said something so beautiful to me yesterday, which I just had a good laugh. She said, actually, a trigger, the words was, a trigger to activate is a two-way switch, not a fork in the road. So literally, it's just a switch that just goes one way or the other so fast. So if you're able to just, when you have these, if you have the ability to recognize that you're a powerful creator, and you have the ability to go, wow, I can just bring myself into a space of equilibrium. I don't know yet what's going to happen, but I know that right now I can take care of myself right now. Then that tells the baby in that moment, okay, I can downregulate. So because you remember, what they're hearing is the beat of the heart. And they're having the pulsation. So they're not just hearing it, but they're having the pulsation going through their body. So when you look at a baby and you look at them on scans, if you look, you can actually see them sort of do this because their whole body is bouncing with the heartbeat. So you can imagine what the impact it is. Mm-hmm. So when you're in that place of real, yes, let's just connect. Let's talk to our baby. Yes, we're scared. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this might not be the best thing, but you and I, we're going to get through this. Yeah. We're going to get through this. We're okay. Mm-hmm. By just talking, because they can hear as well. They can hear stories, believe it or not, maybe muffled, but it's the sound of the voice that vibrates down to them as well. Yeah. So it's recognizing all these things. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It reminds me of when I'm tense and my body is tense and something is bothering me, just the thought of having a difficult conversation with someone that is important to me, for example, and I'm thinking about how I'm going to phrase it, how I'm going to, maybe how do I even get out of it? I don't want to have this. And I'm just, as a mom, you cannot just take your time and leave, and you still need to prepare dinner, you sit with your kids, you pick them up. And whenever I'm tense, I don't even need to say anything. My kids feel that, and they come over and they're like, "You're okay, mommy," and give me a hug. And that just happened recently, and I was not even aware of how tense I was. Yeah. So if we think of a pregnant woman and she's really tense and the heartbeat is fast, clenching the jaw, what do you think the body around the uterus, the stomach area is like? Is that loose and soft? It's probably not. So your child feels everything. You cannot hide from it. It's impossible.
And in this case, you thinking about it, your kids are just in the field, right? Yeah. They're there, but they're in the field and they can still pick up these things. So you can imagine if the baby is inside you, how much more augmented that is.
Yeah.
Right? So it's a really powerful way of thinking about things. Yes. And to say that what you mentioned there, everything gets tense and tight around the uterus and around the whole body, but that then means that if you are unable to tell your muscles, tell your body how to relax, that means that's going to be a bit of a challenge when you go into labor, right? Yeah. Because you really need to know how to direct your body to be able to know that it will follow you. Right? Because although nature knows how to birth your baby, it definitely does. The problem is this gets in the way, right? Yeah. This gets in the way. And then, of course, there's other things about the choices of the foods we eat, which also may cause us to be a little more swollen and a little more, keeps the baby out of the pelvis and rather than in the pelvis. So if your baby's hanging a little bit low, it's a little bit better. But these are the things that you would look at if you're with a pregnant mom. You go kind of look at them and go, you look a little bit swollen to me. What I'd like you to do is this. It's just really having an awareness that they can feel those feelings in their body, literally. Oh, right, I feel I'm a little bit denser right now. Okay, what can I do? So being able to make these choices, I think, are really important, but it does require trust in oneself. Yeah. And a belief that I can change. So a belief of capability and a belief of possibility that they can do. Because often when you walk into a doctor's thing, we have been conditioned to believe that the doctor knows best.
Yes. And we are not equipped with having the skills to have an equal conversation with them, because we're so worried that we might upset them. We don't know enough. We don't even know which question to ask and how to ask and how to even voice stuff like, I'm worried, but I'm not really sure what I'm worried about. But I don't feel well. Well, your baby is well, but you're not feeling well. Okay, well.
And it's really interesting. I'm reading a little book now called Blink by Malcolm Gladwell. And really, he's talking a little bit like the fast and slow systems in the body, right? And if you thinking fast, thinking slow by, I can't remember his name right now offhand, but it'll come in a second. And it really is about being able to make real decisions very quickly, these kind of unconscious decisions, so that you bring them into awareness, but that you have an idea what they are. So you can listen into that voice. If it's something that's, you feel, oh, something's not quite right, that you can trust yourself to say, no, I'm going to wait. Or no, what you're saying is not true. It's like a mom will go and say, hey, my baby's sick. And the doctor will say, no, I can't test anything. The reason they can't test anything is because of this rapid system that we have, which will tell us that something is wrong. Because we're seeing so many different things at one moment. And in actual fact, the doctor's not part of the field. He's not in the field, so he can't see it. And so he's relying on thought and logic, and also got fears for themselves, because they unfortunately have been given the responsibility, which isn't totally their responsibility to have, right? They get into trouble if something goes wrong. So they're fearful. Yes. So it's really about, for me, is helping women become an advocate of herself. So part is also advocate to help her husband not be so frightened when they go into hospital. Because I've had so many times where a woman has said, please, these are the things I want. Stand up for me. And the husband gets so anxious because he's kind of like in this space that they actually end up having a cesarean or something that's totally where they wouldn't have needed to really go. And I think that's something that you really need to work with, is how do you get your husband on board, and how do you teach him to be able to ask the questions that will take down, make sure that there's that anxiety comes down enough to feel safe.
Yeah.
And as a nurse, as an ex-nurse, I know how easy it is to persuade someone when they're fearful, right? I know. Yeah. And I hate to think that happened in my life a long time ago when I was 22. I didn't kind of understand this to such a big degree. But what I really understand now is that you can often just wait. Actually, that moment of a pause is often perfect. I mean, I had a client that was going into hospital, and I was present at her second birth, and it was really interesting that they wanted to, when I went in with her, I arrived there, and as I saw they were doing the vaginal, and they actually had ruptured her waters before I even knew they were doing it, and that was just not on. But anyway, they did it. What was interesting is they were trying to get the pregnancy to move forward faster, and I said, no. Is the baby all right? Is everything okay? Let's just check. Is there, and the question I asked is, would any damage happen by waiting? Yeah. And then the answer was, well, if she goes into labor, needs a cesarean, then there'll be no theaters available. I said, well, that's not an excuse. What happens if she goes into labor and everything's fine? Yeah. So do you see? So there's often it's another agenda, and it's just really knowing the kind of question to ask. Yeah.
And a lot of the decisions, as you mentioned, are fear-based nowadays, because the system is just set up in a way that the responsibility is solely on the doctor. And of course, they want to protect themselves and their profession. And then they get blinded by what is really happening. And what are the risks? It's a beautiful question. What if I did nothing? What if we would just wait? And the fact that you mentioned the birth partner, it is a part of my hypnobirthing course where I really dive into what is the role of the birthing partner. You don't have to, if your husband feels overwhelmed and cannot support you, it's better to bring someone else. Maybe you have a mom, or maybe you have a sister or a best friend, or whoever you think is more suitable to be your advocate, because you will be busy focusing on the surges, focusing on the contractions, being connected with yourself, staying calm as possible, and birthing that baby. You cannot have those conversations on and on and on and on with healthcare professionals that change shift, that don't know you, that are trying to intervene with something that doesn't feel aligned with you. So have someone with you that can really support you and your decisions is a beautiful takeaway.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest takeaways. Is to have someone to advocate for you. Because like you said, which is so important, is that you are birthing this baby. You don't need to be bothered about anything else. This is the day you're giving grace. You're bringing something into the world that is the Creator reborn, right? As far as I'm concerned. And if it's the Creator reborn, which we all are, and to some degree, this is just the next expansion of the Creator, then our job is to make sure we give it the best opportunity that we can. And if a mom knows that she's got someone on her side implicitly, that will stand for her, fight for her like if it's a mama bear, really fight and stand there for her, she can just let go.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't have to worry anymore. Yeah.
Sherine, what do you see? What are the biggest struggles nowadays for women in pregnancy?
I think that one is, well, there are a couple, but one of the biggest ones is our feelings of I think there's this split of competition, or a split between needing to be in the workplace, needing to be perfect, needing to be good, and our desire for ourselves to also be in that world where we're generating, but also the desire to be at home, to be a mum. So you've got these two competing needs that really can cause a lot of strife, because we have these underlining beliefs about what's a good mother. Right? You know, if because of maternal investment, most mothers will take up most of the mother care, right? And even if fathers are at home, often mothers are still doing most of the mother care, and there isn't that same divvying of duty unless there's a more aware father, right? So that's one of the things, but also the fears that come from, you know, being at work, in the workplace, which is not mother friendly, right? So you're fearful about leaving, you're fearful about telling them, you're fearful about telling them you're tired, fearful about all of those, just in case you get fired. And I've known a few be fired. In fact, this woman that I was telling you that had this really good birth, she was actually fired, which was really not good at all. So that was very unhelpful for her. So I think there's these things of this sense, the need, the drive, the want to do the stuff that we wanted before, and then there's this that we don't actually give ourselves enough self-care. So we don't take care of ourselves in the way that we can. So I think that's one of the very biggest things. And I think the second biggest thing is this lack of being able to trust oneself to eat the right kinds of foods. And I do think there isn't, in some places, there's the belief still that it doesn't matter what you eat. But it does matter what you eat, because we're living in a world that's not the cleanest world that it was 50 years ago or 100 years ago, right? So we ate mainly from the soil, from ground to you know, the shops were not multi big supermarkets and things like that. So we were much closer to our food source, and so we had a lot more nourishment. And now we have to think about that too, which is an added aspect. So there's a lot more thinking involved on that. And I also think that, you know, most families, I don't know about it in Denmark, but most families here are nuclear families. So they're far away from their parents, siblings. So now it's about finding new communities that can actually support you in a different way, and learning to ask, which is a biggie. A lot of women, that's one of the biggest ones. And I certainly know when I looked at my story with my mother never asked. And she was away on her own, and she was incredibly stressed, all sorts of things, which meant that I was born 6 weeks pregnant. So there were all of these issues that were part and parcel. So those are the biggest things are the factors, that the fear and the worry, and that matching of needs, the competing needs. I think those are the biggest ones.
You've touched on a very interesting point of independence versus interdependence.
Yes.
And we learn from very young age to be independent. Even now, in my work as a parent coach, I see this as such an important value for families. My kids should be independent. I want them to learn how to do things by themselves, not to rely on others. But there is this missing link of, we are all interdependent beings. We cannot and we shouldn't. It's not healthy to be all by yourself. And then growing up, not having the capacity to ask for help because it makes us feel vulnerable, weak, not good enough. We don't deserve that. No, you know, why should I ask for help? This person has nothing to do with me or my life. It's me. It's just on me. I decided to move away. I decided to get pregnant. I decided to be a single mom. So why should I even ask and bother for waiting for support? So that's a very, I think we could have another episode on that only. It's very prevalent at the moment, I feel.
Yeah, it's such a big thing, and I love that you said that, because one of the things that is when we are more relaxed, when we are more in our space, and actually that makes us more collaborative. Right. It takes us to seeking other. Our ego isn't so up there.
Yes.
In actual fact, the more relaxed we are, the more loving and giving we are.
Yes.
Because that's the way that particular part of our body system works. We have the vagus nerve, and we have two systems in the vagus nerve. One is a shutdown and pounce, and the other one is coming forward, being collaborative, looking and seeking and wanting and sharing. So we're trying to keep into that system rather than going into the pounce. But when we've had trauma, or when we have some stupid belief that we believe we're not good enough and we have to strive to show that we're good enough, then all of a sudden we put so much pressure on ourselves. And these are those stories and beliefs that run, and it's like this river that poisons everything, right? So it poisons every part of our relationships, relationships at work, relationships with our partner, relationships with our kids, food, with everything that it does. So yes, it's and so it's really about, I always think about when you're in a relationship with your partner, you each need to be independent, and you need to know that each of you needs something from each other, and it's that needing from each other that binds you. That's the bit that binds and creates something different. Yeah, and you can support them in either one of these, but it's that other connection that is what allows us to become more than we've ever been before. So yeah, I think that's and I love, what's reminding me, I've had a couple of people with Alzheimer's recently, where I've been talking to some friends, and the thing that's the biggest thing that that you start to find is their one thing is they want their independence.
Yes.
So it's the one thing we learn to separate. It's the last thing we lose.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's an incredible thing to just have an observation how important or how much that is so ingrained in us.
Yeah. Tell us how, or before, how people can reach you to sign up for your program. Who is your program for?
Well, my program is for professional pregnant women. That in general, anyone that is who is struggling. So someone that's struggling with stress, overwhelm, or being depleted in any way. Anyone who has that kind of idea that they're a little bit of a perfectionist, that's the kind of person. So, what's really important is for those people is if you find it difficult to ask for your needs to be met, if you feel you must work harder than anybody else, or if you're constantly worrying, so anxious, worrying that things are going to happen. If you find yourself, a lot of times people aren't aware that they're even anxious. They only notice when they notice what it is that they're doing, right? So like you keep delaying on organizing your baby room, all right? So, or you might be thinking more about, you don't talk about your pregnancy in the early stages. There's just lots of different things. You don't go for your appointments. A lot of different things that you might go, why am I doing this? What's going on? This is the kind of thing that's going to be a really important thing to pay attention to. And that's kind of going to give you some indication that this pregnancy is not necessarily going to be in the way that you would like it to be. There's a bigger potential that you are very, very stressed.
Yeah. And how can people reach you?
So they can reach me on my on SherineLovegrove.com, which is my website. They can reach me. I can give you some links for Facebook. So I'm the Conscious Pregnancy Coach on Facebook. I'm on Instagram, and I'm on LinkedIn. So
wonderful.
In fact, you can find me anyway. Just type my name into Google and you'll find me. I'm probably the only Sherine Lovegrove.
It's very important to have this low threshold of being reachable, and so people can find you. So I love that you focus on that, and you're on many different platforms depending on what feels right for someone. Yeah. Thank you so much for this wonderful conversation and the work you do. It's so inspiring, and I wish you all the best for your programs. I put all your links in the show notes of this episode so people can easily just click and find you and book a time with you to see if they are matched with you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Take care. Right. Thank you. You too.